Well, hello there. See, after the last video, I was looking around on itch and saw a jam that lasted for 9 days. Game jams that last for around a week or longer are pretty much the perfect amount of time I like when creating a game for a jam. I wasn't initially planning to join, but I decided, why not? It's been a while since I participated in the game jam. So here's the plan. The theme of the jam is power. I spent a while thinking and came up with this, a racing game where the carts are battery powered. The perfect example with this idea is Sonic Rider, since this game is really amazing and I grew up playing with it too. Now the only things I want to take from Riders are the air meter and the boost mechanics. These two mechanics are the main focus of what I want to implement in this game. In order to test our mechanics, we would need to create a place to test them. So after 10 minutes in Blender, we have this test level. It may not be fancy, but it gets the job done. So if you've never made a racing game like Mario Kart, this video made by Mix and Jam is a really good tutorial on how to create a kart controller. The idea is simple. We have a sphere that we will push around with forces and physics, and then have the actual mesh of the kart just follow it. But it is a little hard to see what's actually going on, so I added a debug screen that keeps tracks of different stats and values of the cart. On the left you can see the cart stats. These are basically going to be the way I can make different kinds of carts with different stats and behaviors. On the right you can see current stats of the carts, such as its current speed and different stats for drifting. With that done, let's add the two main mechanics for the game. Here's how the battery mechanic is going to work. Every 2 seconds your battery drains by a small amount. You can press the boost button to use a certain amount of battery for a speed boost. The speed boost values are also going to be dependent on the type of cart you have. But if you run out of battery, you will slow down to a stop and have to recharge all the way up before moving again. I had the plan to put in items that give a certain amount of charge, just like how Sonic Riders has capsules that give you air. But I had my sister playtest this and she said to let the player just be able to recharge while moving. But to avoid just holding down the recharge button, I added it so that when you hit the recharge button you will start slowing down for as long as you are holding it. Since that is basically all the main movement stuff all working, let's design a racetrack to test it on an actual track. After spending some more time in Blender, we now have this. While trying to make this, I learned how to make this smooth track, which was pretty cool, and you can clearly see that the kart has no problem moving on the track. I also learned how to make trees too, which was a really nice touch to the environment. But just having the kart be this simple box isn't going to work, so let's design a model for it. While I was thinking of the battery mechanic, I was also thinking that kart should be some kind of flying drum with fans, which I thought would be a cool aesthetic for the game. And this is what I came up with. I really like the idea of the fans being not connected and just hovering alongside the main body, which also looks pretty good. I then took some time to texture and paint as well and added a nice cell shader, and it looks really good, very fancy. You might also notice that when we drift, the camera now moves to the side in the direction you are drifting. I had my sister playtest again and the kart felt very slippery because of how the whole kart mesh is rotating. So with this, it now feels great and floaty. Now that that's all out of the way, we need to add in other racers, which means we gotta create some AI. I managed to create an input manager for the player, so now the main kart controller only needs to be told what inputs are being pressed. This allows me to reuse the same script and simply make the AI brain that will tell the controller what inputs it's pressing. So how do we go about telling the AI where to go? We will need to make points around the track that will check when a racer has passed through it, to then send that information to a controller, which will then send that next point back to the racer. Yeah, I made a checkpoint system. Next, we have to make the AI actually see the course, or at least, well, detect the walls or holes to avoid. This wasn't too hard to implement because all it is a little thing called context setting. I used this method before in my 2D Splatoon project, and Kids Can Code has a great tutorial of this, which is what I used. And with that out of the way,
then check this out. Ready now?
yeah, it just didn't work. This was very discouraging because I spent so much time trying to get this to work and it still didn't. So for the jam, I decided it would just be a simple time trial mode. Moving on from that, we need a better UI than this. Since there aren't going to be any other racers, the most important things to have are the current time, the lap counter, and of course the battery meter, which you can see here. These can be changed later, but at the moment they work and give enough information to the player. Also, you may have noticed some environment changes as well as some effects on the cart. I managed to find a tutorial that was able to create these trails. I also really like the look of them because they remind me of the trails that the boards from riders have. There's also these wind particle effects on the fans which look alright. Now the track here looks a little bland, so let's give it a new look. I based this off of the Metal City track in Riders and it looks pretty good. It gives off the futuristic metallic vibe you would have with futuristic games. If you notice all the way back when I made that debug screen, you would have noticed that there are drift turbo boosts. But as you've seen, it is pretty much impossible to tell how much of a charge or boost you have when charging a drift turbo. So I made this almost electric static effect that appears when you have a charge for a certain amount of time. Depending on the level of charge, the effect would change its color to match, which can also be changed when I'm making the cart. And depending on the level too, the thruster and trails will also change into that color until a new boost is added. Apart from seeing the battery meter go up, which you can see I've changed into the circular design, there's now this particle effect that plays which looks like you are absorbing the area around you to charge into your battery. Also, I wanted a way to show when you are going really fast, so I added this particle effect that is like the wind blowing past you, giving some sense of speed when you reach the speed requirement for it. I forgot to mention that there's also now a respawn mechanic which I made when making the checkpoint system. If a player falls off the track, the respawn controller will take the last checkpoint you passed and the next one and see which one is closer. Then it will move you to that checkpoint and drop you off while also giving you a speed boost and take 20% of your battery. So before I continue, remember that game jam I was making this for? Yeah, well, due to some stuff taking up basically all the time during the weekend I had, I couldn't finish the game in time for the jam. But here I am continually working on this project because I really like how it's turning out. So continuing on with the game, I had the idea at the very start to add in weight classes. You may have spotted this back when in the debug screen. There's 3 weight types that I had in mind. A lightweight, a medium weight, and a heavyweight. The lightweights are a much slower but very easy to handle type of cart. The medium weights are what you would have been seeing in these clips. They are relatively balanced and don't really have any drawbacks. And the heavyweights are your powerhouse type of cart. They have the fastest speeds and boosts but poor handling and acceleration. So let's make the heavy cart first. I imagine based on the design of the medium cart that this cart would have 2 fans instead of 4, but have 4 thrusters instead of 2. You can see just how incredibly fast this cart can go. So much so that I had to implement a form of brake drifting to even be remotely manageable. And because of the high speed, you can see that it is very easy to just start flying off the track. Remember this for later. There's also a new boost effect, and the drift charge effect now has a small ring that expands when you reach a new level of charge. Now for the lightweight variant. I wasn't exactly sure how to design this one, but I eventually came up with this. A much rounder design with only 1 thruster and 6 fans. Already you may have noticed just how much slower this is compared to the heavy and medium cart weights. Remember this also. Now that I have different cart types, I needed to make it so that I can just pass in the cart stats resource of the cart we want and have it appear during the game correctly. And that is what I did, as you can see here. Instead of having different scenes of the player with different cart meshes, I now only have one player scene with no mesh, and then simply in the cart stats resource have a reference to the scene with the cart mesh all set up and just spawn it in as the child of the player as if nothing happened. This now lets me create a number of different carts with different stats and colors and models and just have the player handle it without issue. But now that I have the ability to set any number of carts to the player, we're now going to need somewhere to choose the cart we want. And thus I made a small select screen. The select screen when selecting a cart will show off its stats in a little screen in the corner. Although the stats I chose to show were here really makes the heavy cart look insane, so maybe I'll change that at a later point, but that might just be me. So one thing I wanted to have before continuing was a full gameplay loop. What I mean is that you can start in this main menu, select your cart, and then be able to race, and then return back to the select screen or main menu. Essentially a playable game or maybe a minimum viable product. Don't know if this really counts as one, but you get the point. Anyway, I made a super epic main menu with a scene manager that can switch the scenes and also pass the selected cart to the track scene. So let me ask you this. Out of these two times taken from two different weight types, can you guess which times belong to which cart? If you said that this time was the heavyweight, well, you would be wrong. It's actually the lightweight. How, you may ask? I added a flight system. No, this is not scope creep. It is simply just a solution to a problem that happened to be a cool idea. So remember when the heavy cart essentially flies off the track if it gets too much speed and a little bit of bounce? I tried increasing the gravity, but that also affected the movement I had set for the cart. But there was also the problem of the lightweight being way too slow compared to the other carts. So why not add new stats when in the air? All the weight classes will have new stats that are applied when in the air, as well as also being able to pitch up or down till they touch the ground again. To give the lightweights a bit of a boost other than just being really good at handling, they now are faster when in the air and fall slower. Medium weights are almost basically unchanged, so they are neither faster or slower when in the air, unless the cart is made to be that way. And the heavyweights are indeed slower in the air and also fall faster. This created a really cool dynamic that makes all the weight classes pretty much equal in speed and would require skill to overcome the other. This also allows me to create tracks in the future with sections or shortcuts that use the flight mechanic. Now the last thing I wanted to add was simply have the game return to the select screen after you completed the number of laps on the track. Also, when you finish the race, you will see your best times along with the overall time on the track. You can also see that your cart starts flying off into the distance, which I thought would be a fun thing to see. And that's all the progress I've made so far. There's still a lot that needs to be done obviously, but I wanted to get this out there so I can make a series of devlogs out of the progress of the game. The next video will probably be a while when I make a lot of progress, but I am just one spider with ideas, so feel free to leave your thoughts and ideas on how the game looks so far. But with that, thank you for watching, till next time.